happening? At least I've been out shooting for a couple hours today. Move this damn box out of the way, huh? Out shooting with this lens. Hey, I got a photo shoot tomorrow. Hooray! I don't know if I'll make any videos tomorrow. I might. I'll probably be tired. Out shooting most of the day tomorrow. The Fuji XT1, and here we have mounted the 50mm to 140mm f2.8 constant aperture Fuji lens. Right now it's $200 on sale. I've used and tested every Fuji X lens made. I enjoyed this back when I used it, but for off sale you're looking at $1,700 for this lens. And the real question is, compared to the 55-200, and I did a video about this yesterday. I said I'd do the full review later this week, but you know, since I was out shooting with it for a couple of hours today, and I'd tested it months before, and I was out shooting with it yesterday. However, that was a demonstration model, and this one's actually mine. I thought I'd might as well do the review now. I've went back and forth on an email with a couple people today who own the 55-200, and I own the 55-200. I mean, comparatively speaking, I mean, you're talking about $700 versus off of sale $1,700, so over twice as much. And you know, what is the reason for buying this lens? And the reason for buying this lens over the 55-200 is the exact same reason that there's no such thing as a perfect lens. What the hell does that mean? That means that there's no such thing as a perfect camera. The exact same premise. Like the Nikon D810 is king DSLR for landscapes and weddings. The Nikon D500 is absolute supreme king for sports, action, and wildlife. Nikon and Canon and everybody would pretty much go out of business fast if they made one camera that did it all. And they don't make a camera like that, and they do that on purpose. Lens design is a little bit different because you always have to juggle which characteristics it is you want to give to the lens. I was talking about resolution, a grading system for the website, and I've narrowed it down to the fact that all lens qualities emanate from four fundamental principles. I'm thinking of five something else. Resolution, phase, gain, and bandwidth. We're talking about micro contrast, resolution, chromatic aberration, how it actually renders, the bandwidth of color saturation, a lot of different attributes. Oddly enough, the analogies between expertise on fine wines is pretty much identical to the expertise on you know, good lenses versus awesome lenses versus incredible lenses. I mean, it's kind of the same thing, and when someone judges a lens based upon pure resolution only, it's kind of like an alcoholic drawing. A perfect analogy I've used many times. An alcoholic who judges a wine based upon its alcohol content as opposed to, you know, 1,000 other attributes which make it a wonderful or exquisite or an awful wine. You know, a wino only cares about alcohol content. And lens alcoholics, is what they should be called, only care about resolution. Not that resolution is not important, obviously. The discrepancy between not sample variation, but spectrum variation between lenses now is such that while there are some really crappy lenses that are in current production by a few companies, Nikon actually makes a few really crappy lenses, so does Canon. Fuji makes two lenses that are not crappy, but I would not buy them even if they were 75% off, one being the 18mm, the other being the 23mm. Both are very good lenses, but I wouldn't buy them because they're, to me, you know, it's kind of like someone that's been shuttled around in a Rolls Royce all the time. You jump in a high-end Lexus and you're kind of like, oh, this Lexus sucks, even though it's a perfectly good car. So the same thing applies. So far as this lens versus the 55-200, let's get down to brass tacks. This does have faster autofocus than the 55-200, has better optical image stabilization than the 55-200. It unquestionably, a constant f2.8 aperture, it has a far better bokeh than the, well, I was going back and forth in email with one guy today, two people actually, as far as the difference. I mean, I could see something that apparently they couldn't. To me, it actually does have far better bokeh than the 55-200. It's certainly absolutely undeniably a far, far superior portrait lens, since you can back up and take advantage of lens compression and have a sufficient depth of field. A lot of people don't identify and they don't understand why it is that many fashion photographers, people think, well, a portrait lens is like an 85 millimeter or it's like a 135 headshot lens. And while that's valid, it's also true that the characteristics of the depth of field and the out-of-focus background of a 70 to 2, and that's what this is. This is a DX equivalent of the 70 to 200 2.8, which is one of the Trinity lenses for FX users, which is also one of the primary reasons why I bought it. That combined with the fact that it's on sale, that combined with the fact that it has faster autofocus, that combined with the fact that it has better bokeh. It's the reason I bought it, but I mean, yeah, it's a whole lot of damn money, and it's a big lens. It's actually not as heavy as it looks, but, you know, it is one of the necessary Trinity lenses, but getting to the point of portraiture and fashion photography, not that I'm going to be doing fashion photography with it, but for portraiture, taking advantage of that lens compression and having enough depth of field that you're able to get an entire subject in focus, yet have extremely pleasing out of focus background is why, for example, 300 millimeter 2.8. Most people don't even, I think, in their minds, like, well, 300 millimeter 2.8. That's a bird. I have a 300 millimeter 2.8. I've owned many of them. That lens is a supreme portraiture lens, and it is used very, very often in fashion photography and portrait photography. It's like, well, how is the 300 millimeter 2.8 a portrait lens? And it's the same valid reason that applies to a 70 to 200 2.8 or this equivalent 50 to 140 millimeter 2.8, is that you back up, you take advantage of that lens compression, you have sufficient depth of field to get the entire subject in focus, yet the background is incredibly pleasing. A 300 millimeter 2.8, a 200 millimeter f2, by the way, which is a $6,000 lens. However, the 180 millimeter f2.8 actually has a much richer, better color contrast at $300 than that $6,000 lens. Go figure that one. Yes, a $300 used lens, the 180 millimeter 2.8 Nikkor, for example, is far worse than the 200 millimeter f2 Nikkor, which is $6,000. But the point being is that yes, this is a portraiture and fashion lens, 70 to 200 2.8, 300 millimeter 2.8 that is used, internationally, and it's an exquisite lens. You just take a look at any fashion photography. Just go to the page for this lens, the 50 to 140, or even any Nikkor 70 to 200 2.8, or even the 300 millimeter 2.8. You'll immediately see, portraiture shots taken with this that you can't do the rendering of the portraiture that can't be done at 85 millimeter f1.8. To get that same bokeh, I'd have to have a really shallow depth of field, and that's all well and fine. My background's out of focus with an 85 millimeter, but the problem is that my depth of field on my subject is only like this, or like this at the most. And for fashion photography, the short answer, since I sometimes drone on, the reason fashion photographers and portrait photographers use something like this is, while shallow depth of field is all hunky-dory, it is really awesome to be able to back the hell up with a 70 to 200, which is what this is the equivalent of, or 300 millimeter 2.8, get your entire subject in the depth of field, yet still have that incredibly pleasing background. And you cannot do that with the 135 f2, for example, which is a headshot portraiture lens. You cannot do that with an 85 millimeter. I don't care how damn fast it is. The Fuji 56 millimeter f1.2, which I also happen to have, the reason it's f1.2 is so it'll have the same bokeh as an 85 millimeter full frame at f1.8. But that shallow depth of field, that's wonderful. If that's what you want, that's fine. But if you're a fashion photographer, you're someone that's taking wedding shots and you're trying to get the entire subject within the depth of field so you can see the entire subject, not just this spectrum of the depth of field, then this is why someone would use or own a lens like this. Yes, a 70 to 200 2.8 or a 300 millimeter 2.8. This is kind of the long answer of why I would own this lens. It's like, well, the 55 to 200 is a lot cheaper. It's an awesome lens. You highly recommend it. And when I made that video yesterday, people didn't understand. What people don't understand too is that their thinking is that, well, the 55 to 200 Fuji lens, it's like a Lexus or a nice Toyota. And that's all well and fine. It's extremely reliable. It's ultimately relatively cheap. But it's like, why would you buy a Lamborghini for a lot more money? Why? With that same range, let's assume both had the same speed, which of course they don't have the same speed. Why? Because there's a level of attribute and quality there that does not exist with the Toyota versus the Lamborghini. If they both have the same focal range, they certainly don't have the same depth of field. So you confuse some people. It's like, why the hell would you buy that expensive lens? And I was planning on buying it when it went back on sale, and since it's back on sale, I bought it. This lens, the 50, it's kind of a long diatribe to explain why I would actually buy this lens, since I have the 55 to 200. It's a lot more money. It's, okay, it's a constant aperture of 2.8. But there are, some very valid characteristics, attributes of this lens that I don't have with a 55 to 200, even though this is a lot more money. 72 millimeter filter is 2.2 pounds. Compared to a 70 to 200 2.8 full frame, that's incredibly lightweight. As far as the four characteristics that I'll be judging things on now, since I can narrow everything down within 4 spectrum, the resolution, I give it 9 out of 10. The phase, which encompasses a chromatic aberration and several other things, I give it a 10 out of 10. It does have 23 glass elements. The gain on the lens, I give it an 8.5 out of 10. Most of that is due to the fact that there's 23 glass elements. The bandwidth, as far as the color saturation, I actually rated about a 7.8 out of 10. It does have that very dreamy effect, which is beautiful for portraiture. There's nothing lacking in this lens. The build quality, by the way, is a 10 out of 10. Overall, I give the lens an 8.5 or 8.8 out of 10. It does have a removable lens mount with the 2 screws on the base here. You're not actually able to remove the mount, just the actual footing via the 2 screws back here. The zoom on it is internal, so the lens will not move, will not telescope when you go from 50 to 140. The zoom knob is rubber, but the focusing knob is all anodized aluminum. The entire lens is actually aluminum. Except for the rubber zoom ring. One distinguishing characteristic of this, and nobody would ever notice it, and you compare it to the back of another lens, is that the actual lens mount itself is a brass composite metal compound. You could see that it actually has a brass look to it, as opposed to the chrome-plated steel mounts on other Fuji lenses. Thankfully, Fuji did learn their lessons, and they redesigned their lens caps, so they're not crappy anymore. Who cares about the lens hood? They're all plastic, right? What's to say about the lens hood? Yeah, brass mount, weather seal, which doesn't really mean a damn thing. Optical image stabilization, which is better than the 55 to 200. Constant aperture, as I said. Just a wee bit less saturation. I mean, this has as many glass elements in it as the 70 to 200 2.8 Tamron for Nikon. It's an excellent lens. I bought it for several valid reasons. There's no perfect lens, like I said, and it has several awesome attributes and characteristics over the 55 to 200, which is a lot less money and a lot smaller. And certainly that would be the lens that I would travel with. That being said, for a 70 to 200 equivalent, which is what this is, well, technically 76 millimeters to 200 and something millimeters, but basically 70 to 200 to 2.8 constant aperture. This is one of Fuji's Trinity lenses that, combined with the 16 to 55 2.8, are what they call a red badge lens, which doesn't really mean a damn thing. There's a little red badge on the side of the lens. It's made equally as well as some of Fuji's other best lenses. Build quality is absolutely exquisite. The only lens on Earth that's made better than this is like an old Leica lens or a current day Voigtlander or Zeiss lenses. So we have Voigtlander, Zeiss, and right underneath that, just sucking at the fanny of Zeiss and Voigtlander, you have Fuji lenses like this. Beats the hell out of the quality of anything that Nikon currently produces, except for some of the really old AIS lenses, of which Nikon still does make a few of those. So ultimately give the lens an 8.5 out of 10. There's tons of pictures of this. I'm going to be out actually shooting with this on a photo shoot tomorrow, which I'm kind of dreading because my feet are going to be worn out and it's going to take most of the day to do. So compared to the 55 to 200, faster autofocus, a little bit better optical image stabilization, certainly better bokeh, and certainly a far superior portraiture lens. Also does have better corner-to-corner sharpness than the 55 to 200 at equal apertures. The vignetting is superior on the 50 to 150. And can I recommend this lens? No, I mean 99% of what I do is I recommend the best value lens. Should I say, if someone has an unlimited budget, I'll say, yeah, go out and buy this damn lens. It's great. I mean, it is awesome. I bought this lens for the same damn reason. I don't have an unlimited budget, but I bought it. It's on sale, and I bought it for valid reasons. But, to anybody else that's like, I just got into Fuji and I want to buy a lens, I would not recommend this. I would say buy the 55 to 200, and that leaves you enough money left over for a hell of a lot of other stuff, which would be a total of like 2 more lenses or God knows what. So, anyway, thanks for watching. I've got about 8 hours underneath the hood in total on the 50 to 140, including the first time I used this lens, a borrowed lens, months and months ago. So I like it a lot, and when I used it then, I knew I would buy it, and I was waiting for it to go on sale again, and it did, and I bought it, and there it is. Okay? Catch you later, girlfriends. Bye.